Sometimes you see a news clip that makes you stop and rewind just to be sure you heard it correctly. I had one of those moments, man, watching this and watching CNN cover a huge story about a federal raid on cannabis farms in California. Right in the middle of this terrible story about child trafficking, the anchors started talking about nuance. They started talking about the economic realities for children who cross the border alone and how a job on one of these farms might be the only opportunity they have. And I was stunned. This wasn't some random guess. This was a CNN anchor. And it sounded a lot like they were making excuses for child exploitation. And this isn't just a mistake. This is how they do it. They take something that everyone knows is wrong and they try to soften it, clean it up, and convince you that it's actually complicated. We need to break down what happened in these raids and, more importantly, how the news media we're supposed to trust is framing it because it's deeply disturbing. So, before we get to the anchor and get back to the anchor, you need to understand the shocking story that started all of this, right? On July 10th, federal agents, including ICE, raided two massive legal cannabis farms in California. They were run by a company called Glass House Farms. Over 300 undocumented workers were arrested. But here's the part that should make you sick. They found and rescued at least 14 children for what Homeland Security is calling potential forced labor, exploitation, and trafficking. 14 kids, some as young as 14 years old, and many of them have traveled all alone from places like Mexico and Honduras. And these aren't kids earning a little summer cash. These are vulnerable children thousands of miles away from home, many trapped by debt to the smugglers who got them into the country. And the scene of the raid, it was just total chaos, man. The raids were met with violent protests. People threw rocks and fought with federal agents. The FBI is now offering a reward for somebody who allegedly fired a gun at them. And this is the serious and dangerous reality that a CNN anchor decided to get all philosophical about. Glass House, the company, denies knowing anything and says it's cooperating, but now government agencies are investigating them for child labor violations. And it's a huge story about exploitation, immigration, and the dark side of the legal marijuana business. Okay, so let's get to this TV moment, right? I want to play the clip and then I want to give more of my input and then I want to know you guys' thoughts down in the comments below. If you get some value from this video, please give this video a big thumbs up. Check it out.
Glass farm, a glass house marijuana farm. Here's what people don't want to see. On the other side, they don't want to see people throwing rocks into the cars of federal agents. They don't want to hear that someone supposedly opened fire on them. They also don't want to learn that there are a bunch of kids there that are undocumented or unaccompanied, and they think this is crazy talk, and we should be focusing on that. For one thing, how did those kids get there?
Well, I just want to add one thing. We do have to go, but the UFW, the United Farm Workers, put out a statement about this. They said the UFW can confirm farm workers were critically injured yesterday during chaotic raids in Ventura County, California. Others, including U.S. citizens, remain totally unaccounted for. Many workers, including U.S. citizens, were held by federal authorities at the farm for 8 hours or more. U.S. citizen workers report only being released after they were forced to delete photos and videos of the raid from their phones. They also added that farm work is exempted from child labor laws. So
you're telling me undocumented?
I'm not saying the undocumented.
I'm not talking about work at a marijuana farm.
I'm not talking about the undocumented part, but according to this statement, in this country, not just at farm, not at marijuana farms, at all
semantics.
Farms.
Look at the reality of what we're talking about. How did an unaccompanied, undocumented 14-year-old in the middle of the day?
I believe, and many people might believe, children should be subject to child labor laws.
Absolutely.
But it's true in this country that when it comes to agricultural work, they're not. And that includes marijuana farms. So the legality of their status is a separate issue. But the fact of children being there is not actually something that is necessarily illegal.
I have a really hard time believing
So there's that. So it's not unusual for there to be teenagers and working in a farm.
A 14-year-old can work at a marijuana growing?
It doesn't matter whether it's a marijuana farm or an apple farm.
A kid can't work at a bar.
It's agriculture. They're not smoking
If that's the law, that's outrageous.
They're cultivating it.
Changed.
The point is, the point is, this incident, and we're still learning a lot more about it, was very dangerous and put a lot of people, including ICE officers and those immigrants, in danger.
Federal law enforcement agents.
I agree with you, but the tactics are producing chaos and violence, and I think that is one of the things that's caused people to.
Who attacked first? That's my question.
We don't know.
Well,
we will find out.
Well, it seems like there's.
No, think about
All right.
the
Well,
Democrat.
that was one of the clips that I found on X. All right. That clip was on X in regards of this whole thing with Abby Phillips and the whole situation, right? So, getting back to this moment on TV, an anchor called the outrage over this story hysterical. They argue that while no one is for child labor, we have to look at the bigger picture. They said that the other options for these kids aren't school and a happy life, but gangs or starvation. They actually tried to present these farms as a place of last resort and an economic opportunity. They asked if this big military style raids were really helping the kids or just destroying the only imperfect lifeline they had. Wow. So let's just take that apart. First, the words they use, right? Economic opportunity, lifeline. That's the kind of corporate speak a company uses when it gets caught doing something terrible. Working on a cannabis farm isn't safe. The whole industry is known for exploiting workers with low pay, crazy amounts of stress, and constant exposure to chemicals. For women, there are awful stories of sexual harassment. Calling that a lifeline is a disgusting way to twist what these kids are really facing. Experts have even called labor trafficking in this industry a hidden epidemic. So, second, notice the classic trick of changing the subject in the clip. The anchor admittedly tried to shift the blame. Suddenly, the real villain isn't the company allegedly using child labor, but the broken immigration system. This is a common tactic. You take the focus off of a real crime, exploiting children for money, and point to a huge, messy political problem that seems impossible to solve. It's a way to make people give up and say, well, it is complicated. Yes, the immigration system is part of the story, but that doesn't excuse putting a 14-year-old to work in a dangerous illegal job. Third, the hypocrisy is incredible. Because I bet this same network has shown many stories full of outrage about child labor in foreign sweatshops. But when it happens on a well-connected cannabis farm in California, suddenly it's time for nuance. This is exactly why so many people don't trust the media. It suggests that's what's right and wrong depends on how the bad guy is, or depends on who the bad guy is. It suggests what's right and wrong depends on who the bad guy is. And that's crazy. Because now she's trying to say part of agriculture. It doesn't matter how you put it, but there's no such thing as it being a violation, or it doesn't matter if it's an apple farm or a weed farm for a child to be working in there. And she had a great point. This woman right here with the curly hair, she said, well, then they could work at a bar. And that right there is why independent channels like this are so important. We don't have to answer to the corporate bosses or worry about political donors. We can just tell it like it is. If you believe in that and you think this kind of honestly is important, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It truly makes a huge difference in cutting through the noise from the mainstream media. But what's make this whole nuance argument even worse is that it works because most people don't know how weak our child labor laws already are, especially in farming, because of old loopholes in federal law. The loopholes that are legacy of racism. It is legal in the US for a 12-year-old to work unlimited hours on a farm when they're not in school with a parent's permission. Think about that. The rules for what counts as dangerous work are over for 50-year-olds or over 50-year-olds. Our system is already set up to exploit children, and the cannabis industry is just the newest player to take advantage of it. So the idea that we shouldn't even enforce the few weak laws we have is just an argument for chaos. It's an argument for letting powerful people do whatever they want to the vulnerable. The claim that these kids are better off on these farms is a fantasy made to make us feel better. And many of these kids are working to pay back smugglers, which is basically modern day slavery. And the government itself had admitted it lost its track of these children. In recent years, it couldn't confirm the safety of tens of thousands of kids it was supposed to be monitoring. This shows the system meant to protect them is failing. These kids aren't finding a lifeline. They're being pushed into abuse in some of the worst jobs in America, from meatpacking plants to construction sites. This anchor wasn't offering a deep thought, Abby Phillips. They were offering an excuse for a system that runs on cheap, disposable workers. And that's the reality of it. She were making it seem normal that some kids are just meant to have a life of hard labor and that we should just shrug off our shoulders. And the question is, what else are they going to do? Isn't an excuse, it's a demand for a real resolution, not a permission slip for the horror we see now. So, Abby Phillip, a CNN anchor, went on national TV, in my view, tried to clean out the image of child labor. It wasn't a mistake, it was a dishonest twisting of the issue. She used words like an opportunity to hide exploitation, shifted the blame to a broken system, and pointed fingers at the officers who found the crime instead of the people who committed it. This is not journalism, family. It's public relations for big companies whose interests line up with a certain political view. The public anger this cause isn't hysteria. It's a normal moral reaction to an argument that is completely wrong. The issue isn't nuanced, it's simple. Children do not belong on cannabis farms, exposed to chemicals and criminals, period. That's the bottom line. This whole mess is a perfect example why so many of us has lost faith. We see something that is clearly wrong, and then we turn on the TV and see someone in a suit telling us why it's actually very complicated. No, it's not. Some things are just wrong. And defending child labor or creating nuance around it will always be wrong. But what do you all think? We just here to have a conversation. Am I seeing this clearly, or am I overreacting? I'm always open to the possibility of being wrong. Let me know down in the comments. I'll read as many as I can. And if you want more videos that actually hold people accountable, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching. Peace, family.